All right, Kay, we're live. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'm so excited because you're the I think if you recall my message, you're the first episode I'm doing in a few months. And I did an episode every week. I launched this podcast during COVID and I had some good success with it. And I did one episode every week and that was a lot of work and I got kind of tired and I needed a break. So I took a few month break and I was dealing with some other stuff too. And you're the first one back, and I was by intention wanted you to be the first one. I was really excited to have you. So, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
A podcast, if you don't know, doing an episode once a week is like a full-time job because there's a little bit of research that goes into it. There's the time that goes into the interview. There's the like coordinating schedules and there's a lot that goes into it. So it was like maybe not a full-time job, but it's definitely like it was like I started another business basically. And I was just like, this is a lot. I didn't realize how much little stuff goes into it. The promotion of it, right? So, but I've been an Orlando City season ticket holder since day one of MLS. I went to some games pre-MLS, but I did not like have season tickets until day one, and I had front row midfield. I got rid of those last season, but I had front row midfield the whole time, all the way up until the new stadium. And yeah, just so you know as well, and we're live now, but it's just I just go with the flow. You'll see the camera a little bit blurry on the recording. Sometimes it'll be blurry like that we see, but the final version is going to be like perfect audio video, just so you know. So if you see that. But anyway, I've been a day one MLS supporter. So would love to hear really just how you, and then I'll stop talking, how you like started the club. Like how did that come about?
Okay, I'll try and do a little bit of a condensed version or we'll be here all day. I think the genesis of it was my ex and I were living in Austin. We both sold our businesses and we're kind of at this really kind of great point in our lives where it was, what do we want to do next? And let's do something together. So that was, I guess, the the mindset originally. And then he was an owner in a team in England, actually our hometown team, Stoke City, who at the time were in the Premier League, and they were looking for an affiliate in the US. So we were living in Austin. So I guess that was our first foray into what does soccer even look like in the US? You know, how is it structured? How many teams are there? Where are the teams? And so we couldn't really find what we thought they were looking for. So we just decided we'd start a team. Why not? And I think, you know, we both got business background and obviously both got a huge passion for the sport itself. You know, in England, that's the sport you grow up with. Everyone loves soccer. You know, it's every small town has a team. You know, there's 92 professional teams in England. When you think of the size of it, and then MLS is still only, you know, we're still shy of 30. So, you know, there's plenty of growth here. So we went to United Soccer Leagues, who, funnily enough, are based here in Florida. They're in Tampa, with our ideas, and they were very keen to welcome us in. We started the team in Austin, and it fell flat. It's kind of ironic in a way because Austin now has a professional team, an MLS team, and started play. But we were just, I guess, wrong place, wrong time. So we spent 3 years throwing a lot of money at it and not really getting anywhere. You're fighting UT, which is the kind of the giant that smothers everything else in Austin. So rather than just give up, we went back to United Soccer Leagues and they said, would we think about moving? Would we think about changing markets? And they had a little, not exactly a huge list, but they had a list of some places to go check out. And Orlando was one of them. You know, and it's, I guess, like a lot of Brits, I had no idea about the real Orlando. You know, I'd only ever seen the theme park side of Orlando, but we flew in. You know, we had a look around. We met with some folks, and ultimately made the decision to move here, which obviously turned out to be the right one. But I think by then the dream had changed a little bit to, you know, go big or go home. So if we're going to do this, let's aim for Major League Soccer. And that was another, I guess, really good reason to move to Orlando. Was if you looked at a map of the US at the time and you looked at where all the MLS teams were, there was absolutely nothing in the Southeast. So we knew that eventually MLS was going to come this way. And so why not be us? So we said at the very first press conference in this month, 2010, that, you know, we were minor league right now, but we're going to be major league within the next 5 years. And we were. So 2015 was, you know, the foray, the first game in Major League Soccer. The picture behind me there is the stadium, you know, with 62,500 people who turned out for that very first game. So yeah, it was the right place, right time, and a lot of the right people as well. You know, we will always be indebted to Mayor Dyer, who saw the vision, wanted us here, and did, you know, open doors for us, introduced us to people who he thought might, you know, be able to help us with the dream. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was there that first game, and I remember the energy. I can't remember what was better energy, that game or the first game at the new stadium. They were both great energy, but the first one is just way more people, like twice plus or whatever, 2.5 times as many people, whatever the math is. But I just remember it was just such great energy. It was such a great experience. I had front row tickets back then. I was like, thought I made it. I thought I made it in life. I was like, I have front row tickets. The energy in there, I was on top of the world that day. It was, and then I still remember Kaká tied it up in like, I don't know, the 80-something minute, maybe the 82nd minute. I can't remember exactly, but it was crazy.
Felt like a win. Yeah, felt like a win.
And it did. And NYFC has kind of always been our rival ever since. And for those that don't know, NYFC plays at Yankee Stadium, which I think is a giant joke because it's not even a real soccer, like a real pitch. But that's a whole nother story. So by the way, I have an England soccer story I have to tell you, you'll probably appreciate. But because I have some international friends, and that's actually where I have in common with a lot of my international friends. They're like, oh, wow, you're an American that likes soccer. And I'm like, I play a lot of FIFA. I just follow world soccer. So I'm able to bond with them on this stuff. And I think MLS, maybe most of the last 20, 30 years has kind of been looked at as a joke. But I think really around the last 5 years or so, we're starting to attract much bigger players around when like Orlando City became MLS. Just, I think Kaká, that was unprecedented. I mean, I know that was, you know, he was the highest salary at the time. And I know that was big for MLS. Like that was huge. So it's really come a long way. And yeah, you guys got in at a great time because it's, yeah, and it is wild looking back at it too, that there's Miami and Atlanta, but there wasn't a team in the Southeast the whole time. So when you were looking at other cities, do you remember Orlando was one of the options? And that is ironic that the Austin has the MLS team now, but what were the other cities? Do you recall besides Orlando?
Charleston was one. They already had a USL team. We still have I think they still do, Charleston Battery, but they were looking for new investment. It just didn't seem like an MLS market, I guess. I'm trying to think where the other one was. It was by the sea. I'm trying to think where it was now. But again, just not, I think, like I say, by then we'd started thinking differently. And instead of being, a smaller town team, that we wanted that big stage. And, Orlando only had one other professional team here, which is the Magic. It has amazing transportation opportunities in terms of, everyone flies to Orlando. So, that was great. And then, the diversity of the population. I love looking around at the crowd at our games and thinking, gosh, we are represented by so many countries and ethnicities. It makes me happy seeing everyone come together. And it's, it's something that sport does. But I think in particular soccer, because of its international, global appeal, that it attracts people from so many different backgrounds, who all unite under purple or whatever your team color is. But it can be a very unifying presence.
I agree completely. I'll be with like some of my more casual soccer fans when I'll take them to games, and I'll just be going through the starting 11. I'll be, this guy's from Peru, this guy's from Colombia, this guy's from Sweden. Like we have less Americans on our team, I think, than international at this point, and which is great. And I agree. So what also, I'm sure this is nothing you don't know. I think you already figured it out, obviously, and has achieved a lot of success. But Orlando has, the tourism market. Do you have like a rough breakdown of like, on average on games, like how many of the fans and supporters are like locals compared to people from out of town? Do you have any rough data on what that breakdown is?
I couldn't tell you the rough data. I know our marketing department could, but we don't. It's not really a. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we have visitors. Of course we do, but it's majority like local support. Majority. Obviously I'm from England, and we've got fan clubs over there. They're very active on Twitter. They actually have, sometimes they'll have watch parties in England at some ridiculous time in the morning. And we know that there are people who wait for the schedule to come out, and then plan a vacation so that they can, not just do all the usual Orlando stuff, but also come to a game. But it's still not, it's still mostly local support.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a lot of friends that go to games regularly or own season tickets. So I like that the new stadium is an actual pitch too. It feels so much more like how a game should feel, right? It's more tight knit. There's not a bad seat in the stadium, right?
And I think we brought in some features from Europe as well. For instance, the half like a roof. So many stadiums here, and I've never understood it, because remember, I've lived in Texas where it's boiling hot as well. Why do all the stadiums, why are they all open? Why is there no shade or even protection from rain or anything? Like, it's just so weird to me. But the other piece for us is the amplification of the sound. So when you're singing and chanting and yelling in a stadium with a partial roof, then, it makes it even louder than it normally would be.
Yeah, no, it's have you ever been to a Borussia Dortmund game?
Mm-mm.
And in Dortmund, Germany? No. That's I went to one of those. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was 82,000 people there on a Tuesday night. Like, the whole town shuts down. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But the fact, like, have you ever been to a Sunderland game?
Yes. Well, yeah, a long time ago. Gosh, a long time ago.
Yeah. So a good friend of mine is friends with the owners of Sunderland. So a couple of years ago, I went to a Sunderland game, which was most Americans I know. I don't know any other American that's been to Sunderland. That was a very unique experience. We took the train up to Newcastle and then took an Uber to Sunderland, but that was a cool experience. We hung out on the field pregame, and I brought some of my friends that I met at in my season ticket sections. Like, I actually still keep in touch with like the people we met, and we've kept the same section the entire time. We actually met at the first game in 2015, and we a group of us ended up going to England together to see that Sunderland game, and then we saw a few days before we saw USA and England at Wembley Stadium. So it was a really cool experience.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool trip. But I think that's indicative of soccer fans worldwide. Wherever you travel, you always look to see if there's going to be a game on. You know, whether you're in Spain or Portugal or France or Italy or wherever you're going, you know, you would always look to see, you know, is there a game going on that we might be able to watch while we're there. So yeah, it's definitely a soccer thing, football thing.
Yeah. What do you think the hardest thing about making this club successful was for you?
The hardest thing, I guess in the beginning, it was getting people to even know that there was a team here. You know, we literally, we did the press conference in October 2010, and then we started playing in March of the following year. You know, we were in the Citrus Bowl, as it was then, with I think we actually had about 5,000 odd people came to that first game. We actually played the Philadelphia Union, who were an MLS team at the time, and we won. But that was the hardest piece, was persuading people that this was going to succeed, because there'd been teams here in Florida before that had failed. And so there was a lot of skepticism. You know, why do you think soccer's going to make it now? You know, there were two teams here and they've gone. You know, how do you think you're going to be any different? So I think that was the hardest thing. But as I say, we had a lot of people who just opened their arms and their doors and said, you know, we want to help. And, you know, we put together an advisory committee with a lot of big hitters, if you like, you know, from the community, who we would keep updated with the progress of, you know, what we were doing. And they then became our ambassadors and our advocates out in the field. So when people would say, oh, have you heard about, you know, Orlando City, you know, what is this all about? We had all these people who had all the up-to-date information and could tell them. And I think that helped. And then the other piece, and, you know, it's obviously my piece of the puzzle, if you like, is the community piece. So at the time, we had it written into the contracts of the players that they had to do 20 hours each of community service every season. And I used it every single hour. You know, I'm still in touch with, obviously, loads of those players. And Miguel is obviously still with us. You know, he's our broadcaster now, was our goalie. But I sent them out everywhere in the community, everywhere. And so, you know, bit by bit, little by little, people start, you know, one of the players would go to a school and talk about what they did and get the kids all excited. Then, you know, we all know the power of you know, kids spending power. They go home and they say, Mom, Dad, you know, I met this soccer player and, you know, they're playing on Saturday. Can we go? And so a lot of it was very, very grassroots, very grassroots. Yeah, I guess that was the hardest piece.
Wow. Yeah. I actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I wrote his name down. I actually know Miguel. Because I was familiar with him. I have a Miguel story and a Jason Christ story. So I was just downtown Orlando because I live downtown, and I was just walking and I walked by Miguel. I was like, hey man, I think I just said something along the lines of like, like super random. Do you want to be friends? You know, like, and he's like, yeah, I guess. I was like, dude, I like invited him to lunch, and we just like, we keep in touch. Maybe, you know, we've hung out here and there over the last couple of years. He's a great guy. He's a great ambassador for the club. I think he's doing a great job as an announcer too. And Jason Christ, when he was our manager, I was at, do you know Yard House on International Drive?
Mm-hmm.
So I was sitting there and I just like looked over, and like, granted, I'm a like pretty serious fan. So I know like, and like two people down, I was just like the whole time, I didn't even realize it till like maybe 20 or 30 minutes into dinner. I was with a friend. I'm like, I think that's Jason Christ, like right next to me. So I just got up and I was just like, hey, I just wanted to say hi. And I'm like, try to be super chill about it, because I'm not like, you know, I mean, it's just people, right? I'm just like, and I asked the same thing. I was like, hey, I know this is super weird. I don't know what else to say, but I was like, would you be like down to be friends and like exchange contact info? Like I just asked something like that, and he was also super friendly. He's like, yeah, he's like, you know, it was like, he'd take down my number, and then we actually like met for like beers once or twice. And I just, you know, I thought that was so cool. He was just super friendly, and like any fan, I'm like, why aren't you doing this? You know, I was like, why is, you know, he's starting and not him, you know? And it's like just being super critical. But yeah, he dealt with it, and unfortunately, you know, we ended up parting ways with him at around that time too. But I just, yeah, it's super strange, like just like law of attraction, like how I just randomly connected and built relationships with like two people from the club like that. You know what I mean? Just like completely on my own, not like introduced. I think it's just like energetically, you can just kind of will that stuff into existence. You know, I believe that. I don't know if you do.
No, that's one of the reasons for, you know, going out at that first press conference and putting it out into the universe that we wanted to be a major league team, not just a minor league. Because, you know, I think you put it out there, and then it's up to you to make it happen then. You know, you said it, so do it.
And maybe this is a good lesson for all the kids out there. No, I mean, I guess everybody, but you never get what you don't ask for, right? Like, I'm sure, I don't know how many people asked Jason to be his friend when they met, but maybe not that many. I mean, like, I just, like, worst case, he said no. You know, I was just like, hey, I was like, this is like, it was like he was with his wife. It was like I was asking to go on a date or something with him. I was like, do you want to be friends? And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, that'd be cool. We can like grab a beer or something. And it's like, if I wouldn't have asked though, like, you just never know what would happen. So you don't get what you don't ask for is kind of the lesson I've taken from that. What's your exact role now with the club? Like, what's your day-to-day look like?
So it's a combination of community relations and the foundation. So community relations covers everything from government relations stuff, you know, whether it's working with our local commissioner on, you know, some local events where we can help support, whether that's, you know, a backpack drive, or, you know, we gave out 600 turkeys last Thanksgiving to the people of Paramore. We invited them into the stadium to come and collect them. Publix gave all the fixings to go with it. We had players there, you know, so there's a big part of it is around how we connect in our community is kind of on me, whether that's, you know, all our staff going and doing a volunteer day, or going out into schools and doing teach-in. So teach-in is basically bringing like a career fair into the school. So people from all different backgrounds and jobs go in and just talk to the kids about, you know, what their job entails and what they had to do to get to their job. And when you look at any sports club, it's not just Orlando City. When you look at any sports team, there's okay, there's 11 players out on the field and the coaches are there, but there's another 140 people behind the scenes that make that happen. And these are jobs that, you know, the kids, a lot of the kids, you know, in the areas around here, especially around the stadium, they don't know what those jobs are. You know, we have everything from nutritionists to analysts to sports therapists, through, you know, a finance department, an IT department. We've got 3 or 4 graphic designers on staff, videographers, photographers. So it's great being able to, open the club in that way so that, you know, we can help open eyes and ears, for kids for just future potential careers that they might want to do. Player appearances is, you know, kind of falls under my purview. Donations, and that's mostly silent auction items. You know, all the nonprofits in town, will ask for donations, and that if a signed ball or a pack of premium tickets can help raise some extra dollars for those nonprofits, we love being able to do that. What else? The foundation then is obviously a different kettle of fish, in a wet kettle of fish. Sorry, that's one of my British expressions. It's a different piece of what we do. And so we raise money to spend money, if that makes sense. And our focus is health and wellness, and especially access. So we know that kids in places like Paramore and Pine Hills and some of the other areas of Orlando don't get the same access to health and wellness, and certainly to sport. It's always a sad thing to me of how much it costs to play sports in this country. And so we run free programs. Everything is free. So all the equipment that they need to play, plus the personal equipment. So if they need boots and they need t-shirts and shin guards and all those things, we provide those. We build mini pitches. So if you've been anywhere in South America, you'd know them as futsal courts, kind of a tennis court size soccer field, obviously with goals, and it's obviously small-sided games. But we can very easily install one in an urban area where we couldn't put a full-size soccer field. So we have the programs, we have the pitches, and then the programs we teach have a nutritional element to them. We teach nutrition, and we realized we were teaching it to kids in areas, again, with a lack of access to healthy food. Here in Paramore, there's no Publix, there's no grocery store. It's mostly fast food and convenience stores here. So we went to the city of Orlando and we said, we've got some dollars and we think we want to do community gardens, but we have no clue how to do that. So that started a partnership with them that then led to a partnership with Fleet Farming, who I don't know if you have ever come across them, but they're our vendor, if you like. So if we find a place where we're going to build a garden, we bring them in, and they're the ones who facilitate. We bring our foundation board members out to volunteer. We've had Ruckus and Iron Lion supporters come out to help. And the school that's here now in Paramore, it's 4 or 5 years old. We've put 16 raised beds in there. We've put picnic benches, and then we pay for an educator to go in because, teachers have enough on their plate without us saying, hey, we need you to teach the kids how to grow things. So we actually have an educator that goes in and works with the kids. And then all the produce that they produce either goes home with the kids, or if there's extra, anyone's welcome to take it. So that's kind of where we are with the foundation. And we also give small grants, and I mean small, to any local organizations that are either looking to start soccer or they have soccer already, but they're struggling and they just need, $1,000 to just tide them over or get new kits or whatever it is that they need for that season. Yeah, I think that's at least some of what I do. I do public speaking too. I do a lot of speaking on behalf of the club, obviously.
You do a lot. Yeah, I knew that was like an open-ended question because when I saw everything that you're involved in, I was like, wow, like I just like I'm not very busy. I guess I got a lot of free time. No, I think I mentioned to you when I was just messaging you initially, I'm on the board of Goodwill of Central Florida, and I'd love to maybe set something up. So I don't know if you know how like Goodwills are structured, but there's like Goodwill International, which is like they're kind of like corporate support, but every Goodwill is like regional based. So Central Florida's Goodwill is doing really well. They're expanding and just it's a really well-run operation. I'm really good friends with the CEO, Ed, and he's actually been on the podcast too. And I'd love to set something up. Maybe there's a way Goodwill can support the foundation or something like that. I would love to try to set something up there because I asked Ed and I don't think there is a direct connect between Goodwill and they actually the thing about Goodwill, not to make this like a Goodwill podcast, but they're one of those nonprofits and a lot of them do kind of have, there's just a lot of like myths around some nonprofits, and Goodwill I think is one that kind of got the bad end of the stick where there's just like a lot of myths about Goodwill that really aren't true. And they do like unbelievable stuff for the community. They hire people coming out of prison and they like do things like that. And what's interesting about their model is when you donate clothes, that creates jobs, right? So because the clothes have to be sorted, they have to be priced, they have to be shipped, right? So just the power of donating the clothes, like they take financial donations too, but it's actually super impactful when people just donate clothes, right? So and they do a lot of good things in the community. I know when there was a bunch of when the hurricanes were going on, there was a bunch of people moving here from Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, if you recall that, and they were housing a lot of people. I mean, there's just things they do under the radar. I've been pretty impressed by. So maybe there's some collaboration there, and there has to be something. And I'd love to connect you with the CEO if that's something you're open to.
There's so many. I mean, in some ways, it's the good and the bad. There are so many amazing organizations here just doing incredible work. And in some ways it's why we did form the foundation, because I think the first couple of years we were here, I felt like I was just running around everywhere trying to help everybody. And then you start to realize that you're not really having any kind of impact. You're a mile wide and an inch deep. So that was one of the big reasons for starting the foundation, was we can still help those other nonprofits with the silent auction items, and we do hundreds of those a year. So that's a way we can still help everyone else. But then what do we really want to focus on? And health and wellness just made so much sense. There's very few fitter people than soccer players. It's still, for the most part, a clean sport. There's not been a huge amount of, there's like drugs and wife beatings and all those kinds of things. Doesn't necessarily get associated with soccer. It's also a sport that everyone can play. Boys, girls, there's organizations
short and tall,
out there.
it doesn't matter. Leo Messi is like the shortest guy you'll ever meet, and he's like one of the best in the world. Yeah.
Right. And look at Marta. She's a tiny little dot of a thing, but my goodness, she will run rings around you. So, it's a sport that's so appealing. It also needs very little equipment. You can travel all over the world and you will find people who've made goalposts out of 2 trash cans or a couple of sweaters that somebody's thrown on the floor, and there's your goal. And you just need a ball. So I think for that reason, that was where we decided, we would focus our foundation. And then also the obesity problem that we have here, in particular in America. And it's a cardiovascular sport. And again, everyone can play, and you're moving around quite a bit. And then you can also add in those other elements then of the healthy eating and the healthy lifestyle choices. One of the ways we use our players is, bring them into one of our program sites and get them to talk about teamwork or, discipline or respect. If you have someone like Kaká telling the kids that if he's late for training, he gets fined, they're always like, what? They just can't believe it, that rules still apply to adults, no matter who you are. There are still rules to be followed, but there's a respect piece there as well. And if you're late for training, that's disrespectful to your coach and to your teammates. But having someone, a professional athlete, kind of giving those lessons has such a more profound effect than me doing it or the teacher, or the coach. So that the players are really good role models to be able to do those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I never realized you were so health and fitness focused, but that makes a lot of sense. And that's a great tie-in because we've, unfortunately, if anything, the last 18 months has exposed, we all knew America was unhealthy, but I think we really got a clear picture of how unhealthy we were the last 18 months. I think it unfortunately has exposed, and in many cases, some people just have conditions that they can't control, but in many cases it's, self-inflicted wounds. And that's, for me, I've really gotten more health focused in the last 18 months. So that was a wake up call for me personally, but yeah, I think that's great. And I think, if people are going to not only be just like healthier physically, but mentally, they're going to be at a higher level. I'm sure there's tons of data, more than me, but that leads to more financial success, the more healthy you are. There's just so many positive byproducts to that. Less depressed, when you're moving your body.
Sure. Yeah. And I think one of the other things is, we also try and support the players in things that they might have a passion for. So, for instance, we've got two players on the men's side who one's got a math degree and the other one's a CPA.
Tesho has the math degree, right?
Yeah. And then Kyle is the accountant, as everyone calls him, the accountant. But they have obviously a passion for financial literacy, and especially in kids, and teaching them early on how to balance a budget, and what is a credit card, and all of those kinds of things. And then on the Pride side, they've really used their platform this season. I think every game that they've walked out, they've had a T-shirt with some kind of message on, all the way from Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, support trans youth. They've had a mental health awareness one. In fact, the upcoming game on this coming Saturday, they're partnering with one of their favorite organizations to write Love on Her Arms. And they're like a suicide prevention, mental health awareness organization. So again, it's another great way that sports, has this incredible platform to be able to reach so many people, with messages. So it's definitely been a very unusual last 2 years for sure.
It has. And I actually, one thing I want to talk about the messaging in sports real quick, because I think that's actually really kind of popular, I guess the word I'll use, topic the last year or two. What I will say, I will give Orlando City credit. And I had, by the way, it's a first world problem. I'm really grateful for this. But when I had 4 season tickets for 6 years, it's like a lot of work to get people every game for 6 years. So to like fill those seats, because I would like try to like invite, new friends or like, whatever it is. Just I would want people to enjoy it. And now MLS has really, really taken off, and it's not quite the size of the NBA, but it's breathing down its neck for sure. But even 5 years ago, I think that Orlando City specifically, I can't speak for other clubs, but the NBA and Orlando Magic are a much bigger organization. But in Orlando, you would have felt that Orlando City was the superior like sport. Like I thought Orlando City is always, because I had Orlando Magic season tickets one year. I've always felt more part of a community and more of a better energy and just the whole atmosphere for the Orlando City Soccer Club, and just that fan experience was like night and day for me compared to NBA. And it was also a fraction of the cost too. Like if even if costs were the same, I still would have preferred Orlando City. But NBA tickets are like outrageous. I don't know if you front row or third row tickets for like a Wednesday night Orlando Magic game, they're not cheap. Whereas like, Orlando City, it's still a little bit more affordable for families, which I think is cool. But I will say that I just, my personal experience, you would have like, even friends that had like gone to Magic games and it was their first time Orlando City game, that was kind of a regular conversation. They're like, this is much better energy than like a Magic game. And like, just from a like league revenue, team revenue standpoint, it's pretty big difference. Obviously they have TV deals and stuff, but like that, I think that says a lot for like what you've done with the club. Is just like, it felt much bigger. And I think that says a lot about the success. I don't know if you've heard that. I'm sure you may agree, but I don't know if you've heard that from anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different experience. And I think some of that is, it is very grassroots, and it's very, all around the world, it's more of a blue collar sport. It was always, it didn't start that way. And I can't remember the name of the movie. There is a film out about how soccer started in England and how at the time it was like the elite colleges and whatever. And then it changed and it became a sport that the miners went to, and the steel workers, and, all of the working class folks in England. And around the world, again, because it's a sport that requires very little equipment and everything else. So I think that keeps it very grassroots. And there's a very tribal element to soccer, which I think you just don't find. I think you find it in college sports. I think like college football, there's that almost kind of tribe mentality. We're all wearing the same color. We're here to support our team. And if you're in purple, you're part of our gang kind of thing. So there's definitely that kind of tribal feel around it. And then just some of the rituals, the march to the game, the drums, the flares, the chants, the songs, all of that kind of thing. I mean, we have supporter groups who have their own websites, social media accounts, merchandise. They're very organized. When they travel, they'll message, unless it's Atlanta, because they don't mix with Atlanta. they'll message the other team and maybe even meet up at a tailgate. But it's a very tribal feel, I think, and that's where the difference lies a little bit, to me anyway. And remember, we had the advantage of coming in and being the new shiny thing, and so we definitely rode that wave. We had an incredible marketing manager, Teresa Tatlonghari, who's actually now gone to Nashville. But she was the genius behind so many amazing, the magnets, that was like genius. Everyone started having magnets afterwards, but you couldn't get a magnet for love or money, and it became this thing that everyone wanted. You could only get a magnet on a Monday. We called it Magnet Monday, and that was the only time you could get one. And of course, everyone wanted one like crazy. And she was the genius behind so many of our like amazing strategies that we've done.
Yeah, no, that magnet, I mean, that's great she came out with that, because I grew up in Ocala, and that's where my mom and stepdad lived there. And Ocala, for those that aren't super familiar with Florida, it's, an hour and a half north of here. And I see the magnets all over Ocala. Like, that's what's crazy. And I'm just like, apparently there's just, pockets of Florida. And Ocala is like more small town. It's not like a giant city or anything. So I'm like, I see these Orlando City stickers everywhere. And like, again, that's the stuff that maybe that's sometimes the benefit of working on more of a smaller marketing budget, less resources, you have to get creative like that, whereas like we're NBA, they've been the biggest guy in town for basically the last 20 plus years in Orlando. There's not been really competition for them, and they've survived because they're the only game in town. And I think that's great. But yeah, not that I'm like anti Orlando Magic, and I still will go to some games, but I enjoy Orlando City games much better. That's for sure. I want to talk about the political messaging. So I at heart, I'm a very like libertarian, which is like actually a classical liberal, which I actually was reviewing the definition of that last night. And I actually think that's best defines me as a classical liberal, which modern day means I'm like libertarian. So I'm very pro free speech. I think that's one of the, if not the most important things to protect in our nation. So I'm like, with that being said, I think some of the some of the messaging the last 18 months has been, it's a right of people to exercise, they can exercise the right of free speech. So I'm for people doing that. And ultimately that for me is the end all. But I know it has been divisive and it has been controversial too. And I know there's what do you say to the argument of people, and I'm sure you've heard it many, many times, but like just play sports and like stay out of politics. Like what is your opinion of that argument?
I mean, I've had it said to me, so
that's why I asked you. You'd be the best person. I figured you would know. So
like also because someone plays sport, that means they're not allowed an opinion. Like they're not allowed to say what they want to say. What does that mean? So you're saying free speech for everyone, but not athletes? So no, I and I recognize that it can be divisive. We saw what happened in NFL. And in some ways, the punishment that comes with it if you're not careful, especially if you have a league who doesn't support you. But I feel we're really lucky. I think MLS is a very forward-thinking organization. And so, that last year with the bubble, that very first game that they played at Disney, everyone came out with a Black Lives Matter shirt on, and they knelt for 8 minutes and 42 seconds. And I think that was really powerful. I've had so many people, especially a lot of my friends of color, just say to me that was like really powerful for them. And so I think it depends. You can't say it depends on what stance, because, sometimes they may be making a point I don't agree with. But I don't think you can blanket say, if you're in the public eye, they do it to actors and actresses as well. They're like, no, you shouldn't be talking about this. Why? You're a person and you have a right, you have a voice and you have an opinion and you have a right to express it.
what about, and I do agree, and that's kind of like my argument. It's like whether you're for or against, and that's like the beautiful thing about the First Amendment is like we like if we went down policy by policy, we probably would like, you know, disagree on half the things and agree on half the things, but that's okay. I think as long as we're able to communicate. And I think what I've learned from this podcast, actually, because I would bring on a lot of people that I'm like, this is going to be a heated debate. We're not going to agree on anything. And then like when we actually talk, we're not that far off. It's just like, okay, I can see where you're coming from. Like maybe, you know, like this. So like, what about, I suppose like I know there's some players like in the NBA specifically now, that's been a big thing. There's some players coming out against vaccines. And then I know when NBA players were kneeling for the anthem for a while, Jonathan Isaac for Orlando actually was like one of the only ones standing up. So he became like a national news story for that as well. I don't know if you recall, but it does. Do you feel like there's a culture of like pressuring the other athletes to do things where like other athletes are now becoming like, whether they're for it or against it, maybe they're like, hey, I don't really want to kneel for the anthem. Like, do you feel like there's a culture of that, like creating, like, do you think that's a potential downside? I guess I'm asking is not that anybody's like, I'm not against anybody exercising their First Amendment rights, but I view like maybe there is some uncomfortable pressure being put on people that maybe wouldn't want to communicate. And now as an athlete, because of that, now they like feel like they have to. Do you kind of get where I'm going? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Like or go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is, and I've lived here since 2004. Unfortunately, the last political power, if you like, that was in office for 4 years, pushed people into the farthest corners possible away from each other. And so everyone's become very entrenched in, they're in this camp or this camp. Whereas to your point, where you're saying, you know, you had some people on who you thought you were going to disagree with, in some ways, those are the conversations we should be having with the people who don't agree with us, because, you know, there's never going to be any middle ground until we cross that aisle and talk to each other. And I think for us, and we've had this situation with the players, and I think, you know, the coaches have dealt with it in a very mature way, which is, let's talk. Let's talk about, you know, why you want to kneel and why you don't. And then let's agree that either is okay. You know, and I think as long as the team are all in agreement, then everyone's going to interpret it their own way, and everyone's going to write their own narrative about what they think it means. But the players know, as long as they feel in their heart that they're doing what they want to do, and that no one is pressuring them one way or the other, either to kneel or not to kneel, or anything else. Wear a shirt that says, you know, protect trans youth on the front. You know, I think one of the things it does is strengthen, hopefully, that bond that the players have, because they have these really in-depth discussions about what it means. And I think a lot of the backlash is people not understanding why they're doing what they're doing. It's not disrespecting the flag or soldiers or, you know, anybody in the military. That's not what they're doing. It's not about disrespect. And I think, you know, there's such an ignorance out there still of people who don't want to understand. They see what they want to see and they make their decision around it, and off they go.
So like, and trans youth is maybe a good example. I mean, that is that's controversial topic for sure, especially with like once like operations and like different types of hormone therapies and stuff. That's very controversial. And I guess, yeah, again, it is. I go back and forth on that because it can be divisive. And from a business standpoint, I could see why, like, I could see why some leagues are like, hey, we're just going to not do this to be safe. But, at least to the MLS's credit, they've owned it, like, I guess they're not on the fence. Like, so at least you're going to be either full on for it or whatever. But at least I will say MLS seems to be from at least they own it and they make their viewpoints very clear compared to maybe like the MLB and NFL. They're more on the fence, they're.
Well, and I think for us as a club, the Pulse tragedy, devastated this community, but it also showed an amazing, wonderful collaboration, coming together, support that came just pouring out of everywhere. And, we were, we were instrumental at the time and have continued to be, because we took a stance then and we've kept that stance now, where we have in our stadium 49 rainbow seats to show everyone that we are inclusive, that we are welcoming, and that everyone is welcome to come to our games. And that's been important to not be just a check in the box. Hey, we did our bit for LGBTQ rights. We're done. That's not who we are. And so we've continued to be active within many of the organizations here. We still support them both financially and in other ways. We're in the Come Out with Pride parade again at the weekend. I can't remember how many years this is now. It's a lot. And those things are important because, and don't get me wrong, did we have fans at the time who said, "Oh, you've turned your logo rainbow, I'm out"? But what I know is we just have to sit back and do nothing, because all our awesome, amazing fans will come in and go, well, if that's how you feel, we don't need you as a fan of this club anyway. You will see a rainbow flag at our games, both men's and women's, every single game. There's always rainbow flags. And it just makes me so happy that we've continued to show that wear purple and you're in. That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
Be an Orlando City fan and you're welcome here.
Yeah, I will say soccer, again, just from I'm a big sports fan as a whole. Soccer is just, and probably a lot of it is because of, at its core, it's always been diverse. If it wasn't, it's from people out of country, different races, it's like different languages. That's one of the biggest ones you can't imagine. Just like not even be able to talk to your teammates. That's crazy. But yeah, I would say soccer is very, very diverse from that standpoint. And that makes it fun. I think that makes it unique in that way too. Just to go back to something you said you think a lot of fans or viewers are continuing not to understand why they're doing it. What do you think the solution is to help those people understand?
That's a really hard question, because again, I think part of the issue is if you don't broaden your horizons in any way. So if you haven't traveled, or you don't mix with people from other cultures or countries, ethnicities, if you have a diet of a certain, a particular news program, and I'm not going to pick on any in particular, but if there's something you watch every day that's feeding you the same rhetoric
on both sides, by the way, both. I would say, both sides, they're very, very clear bias, I think. And I will say, and sorry to interrupt, I'm 31. I can't tell you any of my friends my age that get their news from news. Most of us have a very diverse news source, social media a little bit, but different podcasts with different viewpoints. And so I'm hopeful that continues to improve, because one lane of information on either side is not helping anybody. So I will say, but I do think it's getting better, hopefully. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, and I think that's, that's some of the issue, and it's not your age group. I mean, I have kids your age, so, I know, same as you, that's where they're getting their news is not sitting in front of the television and watching, and here, it's one of the things I think that struck me after I've been living in Austin for a couple of months was the news that was on the television was local. Like I had to, and that was when I started, getting my news, like BBC, The Guardian, The Independent, whatever, started, because the news was all local, or it seemed to be. And it was like, nothing else is going on in the rest of the world. Let's not worry about the world. This is the world is here, and it's very small. And, it's, I don't know, it's so unusual to me that such a huge country, but it's very inward looking, and it's, I think one of the, and it's different now, and I know many, and obviously in my circle, I know loads of people who travel, but that used to be one of the things that was leveled at Americans was, this percent of people, only this percent of people have a passport. And it's like, it was just so strange to me. And I know it's different, when you live on an island, which obviously England, Britain is, you travel, like you get off the island and Europe and, kids in Britain take gap years and they go off for a year and travel on their own. And it just wasn't, I didn't see that same adventure, I guess, here in America when I first moved. Now, it's definitely changed in the years since I've been here. And again, I obviously, like you have a certain set of friends because they think like you do and they kind of do what you do. So all my friends travel. But I think unless you do, then you have this very insular world view. And so it's very hard to change your mind on anything, because that's what your dad and your granddad and your great granddad and everyone else has done in your family since time immemorial. And it's hard to break that cycle.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. And one thing I would just like maybe challenge that slightly. So I do agree. Ocala, if you know, like the woodsy area up there is very, very rural, very set in their ways. A lot of the kids I went to high school with, their parents went to the same like high school type thing, right? And travel is kind of an income equality thing, right? Like I think there's a lot of, I lived in a trailer growing up. A lot of people around me were extremely low income, kids that, parents addicted to alcohol, drugs, paycheck to paycheck, bad households. And, I think a lot of them would, a lot of family members of mine have like barely ever traveled their whole life, and I think I grew up low income, and I think I agree completely. I mean, when I see stuff like when, again, I think America is imperfect and we have so much room to grow, but, when I also see from the other side, when people say like how bad the country is, I'm like, have you been anywhere like not in Europe or North America? Pretty much like, I've been to Cuba twice. I've been to Guatemala. I've been to a lot of places where Ukraine, I worked in an orphanage out there for a month, and I'm just like, it really makes me appreciate what we have here. Like
For sure.
It's crazy.
I'm an American citizen now, so I mean, I'm not knocking as a country. I've traveled in Asia a lot, and my goodness, I've seen extreme poverty. So no, but it's how do we, and to my kind of earlier point in a way about bringing kids into the stadium or us going out to talk to them. It's trying to change that mindset of the only jobs I know through my family is X, Y, and Z. But here's someone telling me, oh, I could do this, or there's this, or there's this. So I think, how can we expand their horizons without scooping them all up and taking them on a plane somewhere, which, I would love to do, but it's impossible.
That's a great nonprofit idea. That's a great nonprofit idea.
There you go.
No, I mean, there's something there. There's something there though. Like even like middle schools that have trips to, I mean, I agree with you on travel because you're around so many different people, like ideally outside of the US, but even like my hometown, even if those people could like live in New York City for 6 months or, I think it would just be drastically different, but it's, so I have 2 more questions for you. Okay. And they'll be quick. Go ahead.
Hold on, I have one more quick one for you. So I have a friend who was homeschooling through the pandemic, and she had this education pack that she sent off for. And so each week they would pick a country, and for that whole week they would eat food from that country. They'd learn some words and phrases. They'd learn about the culture, the way they dress, and maybe what religion they were, customs that they had. And they did that every single week. So they'd have Greece, or we'd go to Italy, or it would be China. And, you can't go there, but, now they know where it is on the map. She had a great big world map up on the wall. And those kids got an insight into, she found some TV things that they could look at, maybe a nature program. And I just thought that was so inventive, to kind of do a world tour through, visiting all these different countries. It was a great idea.
Yeah, I've never heard that before, but that is a really good idea. I'm sure you're familiar with the documentary or the filmmaker Michael Moore. Are you familiar with him? I don't really like a lot of his stuff. He's a little bit too left for me, but he did make a really great documentary that kind of reminded me of what you just said. I don't know if you've ever seen it. He went to all these different countries in Europe and said like basically like, not that they're better or worse, but he'd be like, this is what France does with their children compared to the US. This is what like Finland or Denmark does with their prisoners compared to the US. And I was just like amazed. I'm like, there are some good ideas like that countries are doing stuff a lot better than us. Like kindergarteners in France eat with China. They actually eat with like actual knife and fork. And they at 5 years old, they have to pour the water for like the kid next to them. I don't know, like if you've seen this. And then just like in the prisons, I can't remember. This is a very like more common in Europe. It's like the exact opposite of here, but they have like little self-sustaining communities, and like they teach them trades, and then like the communities are kind of self-sustaining. So there's like chefs and farmers, and like so it actually is a net lower cost because they don't have to like pay for a lot of these things because they're just doing it within the community. Like there's so many good ideas in like how countries do things better, and like we do a lot of things amazing too, I think. But that just came to mind because I'm like, there's a lot of room for growth, and there's a lot of benefit like seeing how other countries do things. Like I don't think anybody in America, I personally wouldn't, like how cool would it be if like our elementary schoolers actually ate quality meals with knife and fork and like knew table manners and like served the person next to them? I mean, I thought I couldn't believe it. Like I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, compared to what I grew up with, like with crappy food and styrofoam and like loud cafeterias. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, but that's a very, and so my background is preschool education, as is my daughter, and she actually 2 years ago opened a brand new preschool up in Vietnam, where kind of based on a Montessori model where everything's real. So rather than giving kids everything plastic, you teach them to respect what they're using, because it will break if you don't look after it properly. And again, those independent self-help skills are hugely important. And when you said pouring the water, I'm like, I've been at my daughter's preschool where, these little 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds are helping each other. They all have to sit at the table until everyone's finished. So they learn table manners and they learn etiquette. And it's perfectly able. I mean, I love that age group. 3, 4, and 5 are my absolute favorite age group. They really can learn incredible things at that age. They retain it. It's a great time to learn a new language. I mean, these kids were obviously Vietnamese, but learning English. But yeah, it's a different way of looking at things, I guess. And the people have asked me here if I would ever start a preschool here, because obviously I had them in England. I had 2 preschools over there, and I don't want to go down that path again. But I would love there to be a more standardized pre-K education that all children are entitled to and get, so that by the time they start school, they're on a much more level playing field. Whereas you've had kids who, parents are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They don't have time to teach them ABCs and writing and colors and all the rest of it. And so they start at a disadvantage. Preschool education can be expensive. So you're not going to, you have all these kids who start down here, and it's not right. So, but yeah, that is way too big of a job for me to take.
Well, as a libertarian minded person that also thinks modern college systems with our student debt, I think it's like one of the biggest scams in modern world. Because I just don't think college is a route for everybody, but I haven't heard the pre-K argument as much. That's not something I hear as commonly, but I would tend to, if I'm going to pick investing more in college and investing more in pre-K, by the time someone's 18, they're just like, they're an adult. But those ages 3 and 4 are just so impactful, especially because we don't give kids China because we treat them like little babies and we don't think they can take after it. And think about the precedent that sets throughout their life. If you can't trust them with that. So I haven't heard that argument a lot, but I would actually be more for investing in starting education earlier than later. I would be much more for that personally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's where my heart is for sure. Because I've seen the results. So, and I also think we have to take away the stigma of trade school or other forms of secondary education, instead of pushing everyone to get an academic degree, because it doesn't suit everyone. And you can make a really good living. Electricians, plumbers, welders, oh my goodness, they're in short supply. But we don't tout that as somehow something worthy of doing. So no, I'm definitely not a fan of pushing everyone into academia just for the sake of it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I didn't go to college, and look at me now. I have a podcast with you.
Hey,
no,
I didn't go either.
Yeah,
I
and
at 17.
You may. So I try to stay on both sides of the aisle when I'm getting my news. I do my best to be balanced, but one person I really like is Bill Maher, and he actually had some stats on college that he was sharing on a recent episode. I think he was saying 100 years ago is 1 out of every 20 Americans were or adults were had a college degree, and now it's a much higher percentage. And what we've done is essentially they're like, most college degrees are almost useless in the workforce now. Like that, it'd be one thing if we were 6 figures in debt, but there was a clear path to earn good income to pay that off. It's another thing to be 6 figures in debt when there's some giant disconnect between the market and education that these degrees are nearly useless. Like I can tell you for our business, I couldn't care less if they had a degree. We want them to be a culture fit. We want them to have experience in what our company does. We want them to be, hardworking. If it's like, if they have a degree, like that's the least of our concerns because it's so hard enough to find great talent. Right. So, that's a slippery slope, but.
Yeah. But I also think we, again, I could be on a soapbox about education all day, but again, because I've traveled so much, when I was in Vietnam with my daughter, I was there for a few weeks. We went to visit a school there, and it was an international school, and it was amazing. It was so innovative, and their philosophy was, we don't know that the jobs that these kids who are here now are going to go out and do may not have even been invented yet. So how do we equip them for a world that is constantly changing? Here's an example. We employ someone to be an analyst. So the players wear those GPS. They look like sports bras. They wear them through the game. It tells us, how many miles they ran, what direction it was in, what their heart rate went up to, how quickly it came down. Someone has to interpret those results, put them in a format that the coach would like, and then sit with the nutritionist and the physical therapist and figure out a plan for each player. That's a job. That was never a job before. And so for the future of the world, there are jobs coming. I saw one that said a job of the future will be trying to recreate some of the animals that are like we're losing right now, that are becoming extinct, where they've been saving, cells and all kinds of things. But at some point, maybe, we're going to reconstitute them. So there are all kinds of weird jobs that are going to come up in the future. So sitting kids down and teaching them times tables and, the kind of the old ways of and they probably don't even do that now. But those things are going to be obsolete. We should be teaching critical thinking. We should be teaching logic. We should be teaching problem solving, how to get on with everyone. So the class that we went into in Japan, everything was on wheels. So the teacher set a project. She divided them into groups. Everybody's chair was on wheels. Their table was on wheels. They all went off into different parts of the classroom to start a project. And every week she moved them around so that they were never in the same group. So they had to learn to work with classmates. Maybe they don't like them. Maybe they don't get on with them. But hey, they're in your group and you have to figure out how to get this project done. The group dynamics and all the rest of it. And it was just so eye-opening that this was a school that was really, thinking about the future and how could they best prepare their students. And, it just scares me sometimes that we're going to, we're going to fall behind because the system here is so huge and vast. It's 50 countries, all with their own ideas of how to run things, their own tax laws, their own everything. That it's a huge problem. But we need to think about it.
Yeah, no, that by the way, I feel like there's some issues, and we don't have to get specific, but there's some issues that are overly focused on in politics on both sides that I think are distractions from bigger things going on. And education is a much more important thing. That's yes. Our future. I mean, the kids being born today are the ones that are going to hopefully be paying, taxes to, like that's the idea. Like, hopefully they're innovating and creating businesses so that, we can still have tax revenue and still have a GDP. And like we should, those kids are important, uh,
Yeah.
so I have a question that, I asked a friend recently, and I wanted to ask you, because I think you'd have a good insight. So we look back like 50 years ago, like, and we say, wow, I can't believe, everybody smoked and doctors recommended cigarettes. And then you look back like 100 years ago, and it's like women weren't even allowed to vote until 100 years ago. And then beyond that, slavery was a thing. And we just look at these history parts of our country, and we're like, okay, that was like, really bad politics and really bad, like ideology. But what do you think 100 years from now, we look back in 2021, like our great grandkids, and they look like, what the heck were they thinking doing these things in 2021? What do you think they're going to be judging us for?
I mean, we still, there's still obviously issues for people of color. We're still not there yet, even after, all this time. LGBTQ rights, women's rights, look what's happening right now. It scares me. The abortion piece, bans off our bodies. Why are men still making decisions, and it is mostly men, still making decisions about women and their bodies and their health? It's unbelievable to me. My family in England are looking at what's going on, like in Texas especially, and are just like, how many years back are we going now? We're going back in time instead of forwards. So, I think we'll look back on this year and say, good grief, how is that even possible that still was a thing in 2021?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unwrap there, and I'd love to dive specific on some of those things with you at some point, but we will skip that now, because I will say, and I think, and this is something I've challenged a lot of. So, by the way, I have a lot of conservative friends. I completely disagree with them on their abortion viewpoint, so we agree on that. I just don't know why. And again, libertarians, consistent. I'm a small government guy. It's like, not only is it like infringing in people's lives, it's more government spending to then take care of that child. Right. And that child, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know why it's even a big issue, but I guess I thought we were mostly past that one, but it still comes up a little bit. But the other stuff, I will say, and again, I feel like I have a pretty diverse friends group and people that I work with. And the big challenge I have with saying like certain rights, like people of color, is like, I think it's okay to acknowledge we've come a long way and say we still have work to do, and I think that's what I wish more of the discussion was not like people, like I've heard people say it's Jim Crow times and something. It's like, I don't think that's the case, but I think it would be more accepted by everybody if it was just like, hey, we've come a long way and there's been some major movements, but hey, A still happens, B still happens, C still happens. And, let's work together to make that better. So that's how I feel about this, the country as a whole too. It's like, hey, we're so imperfect. I mean, literally we talked about 5 things. I think that like on this conversation, I think there's areas of improvement, but I still think there's a lot of good. Right. And I think acknowledging both sides and having those two thoughts, I think is a good step to get everybody together, because I think there's, I have some former military friends that have like, really sacrificed a lot, lost loved ones in the military, and they're really proud of the country. And it's like, when you talk bad about it, it's like, hey, thank you for your service. You fought for the right for us to be able to have this conversation to, take care of these people. Thank you. So I think, I don't know. I do have 2 kind of funny questions to ask you, but I am confident that I think most around our age, there's obviously some like extreme viewpoints on both sides, but I think like the millennial age, most of my friends kind of are on the same page, especially with social, which again, I think is just a giant waste of political energy is like these social topics. It's like, who cares? Like, just let people do whatever they want to do. Like, that's always been my thing. But I will say that seems to be a pretty consistent viewpoint around even my friends that go to church. They will say like, hey, like, and that's what's awesome, about it. Say, hey, like, I go to church. I love the community aspect of church. I don't agree with these certain things. That's okay. I'm allowed to compartmentalize the two, right? So, all right. Two quick questions for you. The one I've been waiting to ask, the final one the whole time. First one, do any USL clubs actually make any money? I feel like they all lose money. Do any of them make money? USL?
The USL or MLS?
USL.
That's a really good question. I've been so kind of away from that scene. What I will tell you is they have gotten really strong. I don't know if you've been on their website lately, but like the PDL teams, I think they've got over 90 teams now across the country. The league above that one, there's 30 something teams, I think. And then there's another 20. Like, it's grown like crazy. They just announced they're going to have another women's league, which is going to be interesting in 2023. I honestly don't know the answer about making money. I promise you, I don't. I think like a lot of teams, it's an expensive hobby for somebody. I think there's the ability to do it depending on how you run your club, I guess. But certainly outlay in the beginning, it's a lot of money. It is. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. Sorry.
That's our hardcore soccer fans' dream, is to have some sort of relegation system in the U.S. similar to what goes on in other countries, specifically England. So that would be cool.
But that's never going to happen until it's lost in the mist of time who owns the teams. So here's an example. You're Austin. You've bought a franchise. Well, actually, that's not fair. Austin's not a good example because they didn't. But supposing you're coming in the league next year, you bought a franchise at 150 million, whatever it is these days, 200 million. You've shelled out and bought, you built a stadium for another 200 or 300 million. You've staffed it. You've bought players, blah, blah, blah. So gosh knows how many millions we're up to right now. You come in and you play your first season in MLS and you finish bottom and you get relegated to USL. I don't think so. Like, no, that's not going to happen. You've just shelled out all that money. There's no way. So until there's many more teams and USL has grown in strength, where it's not quite such a drop down, then maybe we can talk again. But no, not right now. There's too much money has to be invested. The gap between MLS and USL is just too big right now.
No, that makes sense. And that's from more about it than me, but from the little I've looked into it, that seems to be kind of the viewpoint. So that makes sense. All right. The question I've been so excited to ask you, growing up in England, what is your opinion of the show Ted Lasso?
Love it. Absolutely love it. We watch, I've got a group of friends. So we have a Ted Lasso party every Friday. Sometimes we have fish and chips, bangers and mash, whatever. But we watch it together. And they like watching it with me because every now and again I'll like pause it and say, you do realize like that's a real referee. Like that's Mike Dean. He referees in the Premier League in England, and there he is on Ted Lasso. And that show that Roy goes on, where he does the commentary, that's a real show in England. Jess Starling and Chris Kamara are real pundits, and they actually have a Saturday football show every weekend. And so so they like watching it with me because they obviously get those like little extra insights. I think for me, it's not really. I mean, the football's great. Don't get me wrong, and I love that it's about the sport that I love. But it's not really. That's the incidental thing that's going on in the background. It's much more about relationships. It's about working on yourself. Recognizing that you are. We all have flaws, but there are ways to fix them. And then just those incredible, special friendships, the one between, Rebecca and Keely. I love that relationship. They're two diametrically opposite people, and yet there's genuine love and respect and support there in two very different ways. Rebecca needs more of the kind of boosting of her confidence and in herself, and Keely needs it, with her business acumen and becoming someone who she knows she can be. So no, it's awesome. I think it's been Schitt's Creek got us through the first part of the pandemic, and I feel like Ted Lasso is going to help see us hopefully out of it. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, Ted Lasso is like the best kept secret of 2020. It was just so heartwarming. I felt like it was like so positive with everything going on. It was like it just made me feel good watching it, which was cool. Is it popular with your friends in England too, or do they think it's silly? That's kind of what I was asking. I'm like, dude, what do non-Americans think of this show?
Yeah, so I think my barometer, if you like, I have two boys. One's 30 and one's 33. Who are they've both been. One especially was traveling around the world for 2 years, but he is actually in England right now. And so they were my barometer. So if they liked it, I was like, okay, they're obviously grew up with soccer, massive fans of the sport, and they love it too. So there you go. I just don't think a lot of people in Britain have seen it. I don't think Apple TV is quite so prevalent, I guess, over there. It's one more streaming service people have to get.
Yeah.
But I think there's been enough. There's lots more chatter about it, I think, over here than there is in England. But it's spreading. It's definitely spreading. It's great. I'm a very positive person, so I love that. That's the main kind of premise of the show. Is it's meant to be, and there's tough pieces that they talk about, but in general, you come away feeling good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have that in common. We enjoy this show. So yeah, it was enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show today, Kay.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation.